trying to decide on how to teach your core subjects like chemistry, economics, algebra 2, literature, and then you have to think about electives. Let's talk about 3 types of electives today. Hi, welcome to Learning with Boys. My name is Rachel. I'm a homeschool mom of 4 boys, ages 10 to 20. I've graduated 2, and this school year I have a 10th grader and a 5th grader. Today I want to talk about high school electives and the requirements that you need for graduation. I think it would help if we divide them up into 3 categories. And it's funny because this is not my original thought. I actually heard this from Lee Benz over at Homeschool. But when she said that, I was like, exactly. And I understood what she was saying. And I felt like it might be helpful to explain it to you all when giving my thoughts on electives. Before I mention these 3 types, I do just want to encourage you that I just pray that you don't feel stressed or overwhelmed. And I really do pray that this video is insightful and helpful to you. The first requirement I'm going to mention to you is your state requirements. And each state is going to be different, but they are pretty similar, sort of like with your core subjects. But if your child is headed to a specific college, I would double check on what is required there also. But I'm going to go ahead and mention my state, and if you need to know where to go for your state requirements, my first thought would be HSLDA, and I will link them below. They have someone representing each state that can help you and guide you through what is required in homeschooling. Okay, for our first credit, I'm going to mention health, and that is a half credit. And for us, we have usually just used a curriculum. I know a lot of people like to come up with their own, and we will talk about that. But for us, for my oldest, we used LifePack, their health program for high school, and for my second, we used Total Health. Totally 2 different formats of curriculum, but they pretty much taught the same thing. So majority of, if it's like a required health curriculum for high school, it's going to be pretty similar on how it's presented. Now, we wanted something that was faith-based and showed a Christian worldview, and both of those met our needs. And I do want to mention, if health is something that interests them and they're like, well, they want to do more than just your basic health class, I want to encourage you to go ahead and get that half credit health, and then I will talk about how you can pursue more interest in that area on number 3 of my requirements. Another half credit that is required by our state is finance. And we have, with our last 2, done the Dave Ramsey homeschool curriculum. Now, they usually just watch the DVDs, followed along in the book, may fill out the book some. There is a lot of extra things you can print off, a lot of activities and projects, but we just did those more of real life hands-on, like we opened a bank account, they got a job, and we just tried to help them through those different situations. They bought their own vehicles, and we just did that more of a real life part of their credit instead of following the Dave Ramsey projects. But watching the Dave Ramsey really helped and encouraged them along the way. And that was for finance. And there are different curriculums out there. A couple more actual state required credits that are required for our state is PE, physical education. And it's 1 credit here. I know some states they actually require 2. And this can be any physical activity. Organized sports. It could be maybe they are training for a 5K. Maybe they do martial arts. Maybe they do archery. It can also be in book form. It could be them studying about a specific sport or just learning to exercise and train the body. It could be hiking and biking. And you might think, my child is not interested in any of this. Let me just encourage you, and I say this because for us it was convenient, but we do have a YMCA that is not very far from us, and we have done that on and off for a few months out of the school year, especially during those cold months, where they could just go play basketball. So filling in that credit for us for PE has usually not been a problem. Another state requirement is fine arts, and this one can seem a little confusing and tricky, but for us it's just 1 credit. You could divide that into two different subject matters. You could study art history one semester, you can study composers the next. And if you're like, my child doesn't care about any of that stuff, then maybe if they are in a co-op, they can take art there. Maybe they play an instrument. Maybe they're in the choir or a teen choir. Maybe they would like to learn more about photography. Now, YouTube, for us has been beneficial in a lot of our electives. Some other ones would be digital media. And a lot of times you can find, between photography and digital media, you can find some online classes that would be appropriate for your teen. They might want to try doing sculpturing or jewelry designing. There are all kinds of small ideas out there that you could probably research and find videos on that would be helpful. And just letting them watch the videos and be creative and just counting those hours. Now, to keep record or track of that, you may just want to have a form, taped up on the wall or something, and they could check off like a calendar of what days they did it and possibly how long they worked on it. There may be some days, if it's something they're interested in, it may be a couple hours. So keep that in mind, that it may not be as many days as you think they need to be working on it. Our last and final state requirement, which to me almost falls into the core category, but it is for us written under electives, is a foreign language. And for me, that was probably the most difficult. Let me know below what your most difficult elective might be. My oldest took Spanish. He used Bob Jones for a while, and then Life Pack, and then I think something else. It was really just trying to push him through it. It wasn't that he was not interested. And I will explain that in a minute. My second did Latin, and he just did the 1 year because our umbrella offers a college path and a non-college path. So he just went with a non-college path and did 1 year of Latin. And he used Compass Classroom, and it went really well. This school year, my 10th grader is starting French, and he is using something from Memoria Press. And it is going well, but it is going slower than I thought. And with foreign language, my thought is, keep hearing people say, well, it needs to be a high school level. It needs to be a high school level. Well, I feel like they need to get to that level somehow or another first. Unless you are working as a family with a foreign language through elementary or even in starting in middle school, they're going to have to start from the beginning somewhere. And when they say that, I think they may be talking more about the grammar part of it. But my son right now has a deep desire to learn to speak and communicate and talk to people. And I'm trying to find someone that can maybe be a tutor and maybe actually talk one-on-one, because if they do not have that, they may learn it, they may go through it, but it's not going to stick. Now, unless they're going to be really using it, but it is required in our state. So I'm just going to let my 10th grader go through French and work on it every day, because it needs to be a credit. So he needs to put those hours in, and he does have a desire to learn French. So he says, Mom, I can't. He doesn't feel like he can rush it. He wants to make sure he knows it before he moves on. So that is my thoughts on foreign language. And if he puts the 2 years in and puts the hours in, I'm going to count it. I do want to say, if this video has been helpful in any way, that you would please give it a likes. And also, if you like homeschool content, subscribe. That would encourage me and help my channel out so much. Okay, I'm going to move on to number 2, is the parents' requirement. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean anything that you want to make sure that your child knows before he graduates. Maybe you can count Bible as an elective, or for us, like a Christian worldview, which might just be like a half a credit. All my boys have taken at least a half a credit of logic. I just feel like that was very beneficial in helping them prepare their mind for thinking about how they perceive things and decisions and everything else going on in the world. There could be ACT prep or SAT prep. There could be driver's ed. It could be like an auto mechanic class. So these are credits that you as a parent deem important for your child to know, and these could be a half credit, or they could be a full credit. It could just be one of those things I mentioned, and that's all that's important to you. Okay, number 3 is, I would say it's interest-led, but she called it direct delight learning requirements. And really that just comes down to what the student requires. what interests them. I feel like that can be really important because this is where they're going to be deciding, like, I really am interested in this, I want to do this. And if you don't let them do it, they might not realize that they didn't like it. They could end up loving it and want to pursue more, but it sort of weeds out their interest and help them make some future decisions. This reminds me of like when you go to college and you have to take all those freshman classes that are required, and then the next year, either your sophomore year or the beginning of your junior year, you finally get to take what you're interested in, the reason you're there for school. And I feel like when you get to high school, that desire to take something and claim it as your own interest and to work on it is important. So also keep in mind that this is going to look different for each child. Just because your oldest did this doesn't mean that your second or third will want to do that same interest-led requirement. For our state, we only need 4 extra electives other than the ones I mentioned in number 1, the state requirements. So between what the parent requires and what the student interests in, you may end up with more than 4 electives, which is fine to end up with 6 or 8 electives. Sometimes the electives they choose may only qualify for half a credit. So when I mentioned about health earlier, that was a requirement from the state, but maybe they want to learn more about that. Maybe they're interested in nutrition or sports health. This would be interest-led requirement. This is the time to give them more. So they got what was required of the state. You mark it as health, and then they can claim whatever they want to call this next requirement. I hope that makes sense. You might have a student you may be a family that is homesteading. I know a lot of people are getting into that now, and that might be something you could claim as some form of credit. I would write down hours and specifics that class was, keep things written down the best that you can. They could be interested in cooking. And the thing about that is some people are doing it just for fun, and you don't even think. They cook dinner a couple nights a week, and then they like to make bread on the weekend. There you go. You have an interest-led credit. For me also, I went ahead and counted work as a credit. I called HSLDA just to be sure about this when my oldest was working, and he said yes, and a lot of people just call it career exploration. For me, since he was just doing carpentry, I just called it carpentry. That was the type of work he was helping somebody with. It could be lawn care. Maybe you can come up with a title for that type of work. But you could just write career exploration. Keeping a track of this, and I know in some states you do have to turn in a pretty detailed record, and I'm hoping, if that is true, that you have someone over you that can help and guide you in that direction. I do want to encourage you to look in to HSLDA, to Lee Benz over at the Homescholar. That is her goal, is to help people keep grades, records, transcripts, have all that prepared for graduation and make sure you're on the right track. I do keep records. I have a video on the easy way I do it. I just make sure, and that's sort of why I have a planner for my son, is I want to make sure it is all right there. It's not so much in my planner, it's in his. It's easier for me to keep records that way on what he has done. I do want to say, I just think it's so wonderful how God has made us in his image, but at the same time, each of us are so different. So I've had 1 and then 2 graduate. They've taken totally different paths. They are so different, and God has a purpose and a plan for each one of my boys, and the same for your children. Keep that in mind as you're helping and guide and lead them through these high school years. But as you're thinking about high school and making that list, don't forget the electives. And there's 3 different types, and that state requirement electives are something you definitely don't want to forget. And then there's the parent requirements. What do you really want to teach them? Get that written down along with the state requirements. What do you not want to forget to make sure that you take time? Maybe it's just a semester, half a credit's worth of information that you want to instill in them. And then interest-led, and that's probably going to come pretty natural. And I really do talk to my boys about this, like, what are you interested in? Or, You know, if they start sparking an interest, I say, well, look, you know, we can count that towards school if you help me keep record. And I encourage them to help me, whether I give them a form or a calendar or something. And I don't ask for details of every last minute. And that is up to you. That's not required by my state to do that. But I do have a general idea of they worked on that real hard all semester. And the finished project will show me how much work they put into it. So keep that in mind. All right, I hope this video was helpful. If you're looking for more information on your core subjects like math, history, English, and science, I will link that video below that I did last week. Just remember that you cannot teach them everything that you know at this time in your life. Just really want to encourage parents about that, especially when you're thinking about those parent requirements. I really do appreciate you all watching. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.